Hey everybody, how's it going? Happy Sunday morning. Day 4 of Seattle Seahawks training camp is in the books, and we actually have quite a bit to discuss, quite a bit to go over. Quite a few interesting things happened yesterday and were reported on by the media and the public that attended the training camp. But before we get into that, let's talk about our newest Seattle Seahawk. And look, this one not overly likely to mean that much when the season starts. But the fact that we're bringing him in at all is actually kind of interesting and worth spending a few minutes on. So we signed Sean Mannion yesterday afternoon, and I thought about making a video about it, but it's so unlikely to carry any real significance. I decided to just kind of let it simmer and roll it into this video. So Sean Mannion, quarterback out of Oregon State. He's played under Shane Waldron previously because he was on the Rams. And yeah, he has a decent NFL quarterback pedigree in that he actually is 6'5", 225 pounds. He was a third-round pick in 2015. So he looks the part, and he did have one very impressive year at Oregon State, 2013, completed 400 passes for almost 4,700 yards and 37 touchdowns. But his career performance in the NFL has decidedly made him a complete non-factor when it comes to the professional game. His career statistics are 61% completion, 74 passes, 384 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. So, yeah, this is most certainly a player who has had his opportunity to make an impact in the NFL and hasn't. So, just to remind everybody, the quarterbacks who were on the roster before we brought in Sean Mannion are Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, Alex Magoo, and Danny Etling. So, where does Sean Mannion fit in? Probably nowhere. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The backup quarterback for the Seahawks doesn't really matter at all because there's no way we can replace Russell Wilson with a backup level quarterback if something were to happen. The only way in which it really matters is having a guy who can get the ball to our backup receivers, tight ends, and running backs in practice and in preseason. You want somebody who can at least get an accurate ball to your receiver so they can get a little bit of experience, so they can be having productive practice reps. You don't want somebody like Danny Etling, and I'm sorry to Danny, but you don't want him fluttering these weak balls 10 or 15 yards short of the intended target. You want somebody who can get them the ball, but I don't think Sean Mannion's that guy either. I've said it before and I've said it again. Having Geno Smith as your backup QB and having Magoo on the practice squad will almost certainly be good enough for this team and their situation. So that's all that can be said about Sean Mannion. Probably not going to be around very long, but I don't know why we brought him in at this point. Maybe there's something going on with Magoo that the team hasn't disclosed, and they just want a third-string quarterback who can play in a way that looks somewhat competent. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to what actually happened at training camp today, referring once again to my favorite source, Brady Henderson on Twitter. So, here's what he had to say on day number 4. Ethan Pocic has a helmet on and appears to be practicing today after sitting out the first 2 practices with a hamstring injury. Jamal Adams is still watching and dancing. So, the important part of this tweet is the Ethan Pocic part. He is practicing after missing the first couple days, so it was obviously very minor. Kyle Fuller was still starting at center in team drills, however. So maybe he's not all the way there yet. I know that Carroll said that Fuller will compete with Pocic for the starting job, but it's hard for me to take that very seriously. Time will tell, but I can't help but think that's more of an obligatory thing, and everybody knows that it's going to be Pocic eventually. One little footnote that I picked up from this training camp as well is that Damien Lewis is also practicing a little bit at center. So some people have talked about the possibility of us moving Damien Lewis to center and getting another right guard. That's still apparently on the table, but Posic's back, and that's good. All right. Other than that, as far as I know, in terms of who practiced and who didn't practice, most stuff was the same. I believe Marquise Blair sat it out because he got kicked in the heel. It's considered so minor, it's barely even worth mentioning, but I don't think he practiced today. But other than that, everything should be the same. All right, so as for what transpired on the field, some of the studs of today included a Kellow Witherspoon. He had multiple great breaks on the ball, including 2 straight pass breakups at one point. I think he prevented a touchdown at another point. Kellow Witherspoon may have been the star of the day. And because the cornerback position is so kind of unsure going into 2021, and because Kellow Witherspoon being good for us is so important for this team, that's a wonderful thing to hear. So the defense overall played well today at camp, and Kellow Witherspoon was at the center of that. Brady Henderson goes on to say, Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf still had their moments, including a 50-plus yard touchdown to Metcalf. So there were definitely some offensive highlights as well. Wilson ran for a 7-yard touchdown on the final play of practice. Geno Smith hit John Ursua for a touchdown as well. I've actually heard some good stuff about Ursua so far in this training camp. And again, I'm not really a believer in Ursua. I don't think he's ever really going to be much of an NFL player, but I've been wrong before. And he does have some NFL level talents. So maybe he'll end up sneaking onto the roster, because I've said before I don't think he's going to make the roster this year. But if he sneaks on, he will have had to do something to earn it. Colby Parkinson caught a touchdown from Wilson in a red zone situational drill. Still holding out hope that Colby Parkinson can find a way to be part of the offense this year, because his talents are unique. And I have to believe there's a way to fit in those talents in a NFL offense. A creative, good NFL offense should find a way to use a guy like that. Jordan Brooks looked really good in coverage, according to some sources at training camp. Got his hands on the football several times, nearly got an interception. That would be a big part of his development as a player, because he needs to be a guy who's on the field on 75% or more of the snaps in order for that pick to be worth it. So he's going to have to learn how to cover as well. So that was great to hear. Pierre Desir had a great play to swat away a touchdown to Parkinson on a slot fade. And apparently Kellow Witherspoon had another play today where he denied Gerald Everett what would have been a touchdown otherwise. And final big play from today was a Darvin Kidsey 50-plus yard touchdown. It's tough to get too excited about that, because Kidsey has almost no chance of even making the practice squad, but good for the kid. All right, so that's basically everything that actually happened on the field today that I'm aware of. So let's go into some of the stuff that Carroll and 1 or 2 of the players may have had to say about the way things are going so far. So Carroll had some comments, and probably the most compelling comments you can make right now about the Seahawks concern Jamal Adams. Pete Carroll had this to say: there are no updates on his contract situation, other than that the talks are ongoing and amicable, and we're trying to get something worked out. So I don't really know what to make of this situation at this point, but I do believe that something's going to get done very soon here. I think this is very much like what happened with Bobby Wagner 2 years ago. He knows he's going to get paid. We know we have to pay him. We're probably haggling a little bit, and that's absolutely what teams and players should do when it comes to contract negotiations. But I'm a little surprised it hasn't already gotten done. I still think my theory of him just having a ridiculous notion of what he was worth is probably somewhat true, but I expect things will be resolved shortly here, and if not, I'm going to start to wonder what could possibly be going on. Again, there's no universe where Jamal Adams will be okay playing the final year of his deal with no long-term security. Carroll also had this to say about a couple of players. Duane Eskridge, that's the other one that I think a lot of people are really tensed up over right now. No timeline on Eskridge right now, according to Carroll. He did some running yesterday, says he had a little tweak at some point. I think he said he's making progress as well, so that's good. I don't love the no real timeline thing. I don't love the fact that this is so vague. I don't think that it's reasonable to say we can stop worrying yet. I will stop worrying the moment I actually see him on the practice field playing with his team. learning how to play with Wilson, learning how to play in this offense. So, yeah, that update was not everything I wanted either. At the very least, there's no indication that it's anything terrible, but I'm not thrilled with the way the Duane Eskridge era is starting, because he was already not slam dunk pick. And we've been through this before. We've done this dance before. LJ Collier, Rashad Penny, you guys know. And I don't want to do this dance again. I really don't. Also, Carroll had some very positive things about Robert Nkemdiche, and I don't want to fantasize about Nkemdiche suddenly turning into the player that he was supposed to be coming out of the draft. I don't want to start dreaming huge about, oh my God, this guy's going to turn into the first-round pick that he always was, and it just didn't work out in Arizona because of this, that, and the other thing. But, man, like I said in my video yesterday about how Aldon Smith could really bring this roster together and really bring this defense together, Nkemdiche has the same ability, because he's a very versatile defensive lineman, and I think he could add a lot of value to this team if he's actually able to make contributions on Sundays. So Carroll said he's off to a fantastic start. I'm really excited about what he brings. Carroll is a positive person by nature, but that doesn't mean that he would just say something like this for absolutely no reason. And the Nkemdiche hype seems to be at least somewhat real, so that's pretty exciting. Other notes from Carroll include he expects Duane Brown to practice soon. Brown is here but has been a spectator at practice. We already knew that. The Eskridge and Blair situations are covered here. So that's pretty much it from Carroll in terms of updates on specific players and their situations. He did get into Cedric Ogboeji a little bit, and I'll take a minute to discuss that. Basically, and I don't quite know how to read into this yet, he said that Ogboeji wanted a shot at right tackle, but Carroll viewed him as a left tackle. But he does feel like Carroll regrets handing the starting job last year to Shell, because last year COVID really limited what teams could do in the offseason. So Carroll just wanted to give the starting job to Brandon Shell and run with it. And he said he kind of regretted never giving Ogboeji a chance to compete for the starting job, and that the indication is this year he's not going to do that. Now, in theory, every single position on a football team should be open for competition, right? If somebody clearly looks better than the person that is starting ahead of them, you probably should at least strongly consider starting the person who looks better, no matter who it is, unless it's your superstar quarterback or a super duper star, which Shell is not. But Carroll basically said that Ogboeji is going to have an opportunity to start this year. He's going to compete with Shell, and it could just be him pushing his always compete mantra, which he said he felt like he got away from last year and he kind of had to get away from because of COVID. But I don't think there's any harm in forcing a guy like Brandon Shell, who is pretty good, but he's certainly not great, to have to work to keep his starting job. So I like hearing that. I don't think Ogboeji is very good, although maybe we're a little too hard on him around here sometimes. I don't think that Shell is worse than him, even on his worst day. I think that Shell is a pretty good player, and I don't think Ogboeji is consistent enough to be a full-time starter. But listening to Carroll talk about how he really wants Ogboeji to compete for the starting right tackle job, I kind of like it. You know, it's not like he's saying that he wants Geno Smith to compete with Russell Wilson for the starting job. That would just be stupid. He's not saying he wants Freddie Swain to compete with DK Metcalf for a starting receiver spot. So I like the always compete stuff. I just hope it actually carries some merit. We've seen it with Carroll before. I mean, he had no problems pulling Matt Flynn out of the starting role when Wilson outplayed him in the offseason. And I was one of the people who thought he was making a mistake when he did that. So he's done it before. I think he's gotten away from it recently. Hopefully he can start doing it again. Final interesting note from training camp yesterday. Aldon Smith had a couple of comments. There's been a decent amount of Aldon Smith hype from this training camp so far, I think. He said he can't comment on his legal case in Louisiana or how it may affect his availability. Said he's grateful for the chance here and that he leans on his support team as he manages his sobriety. I'm really going to end up doing this to myself. I can already tell. I'm going to do it to myself. I'm going to start getting myself all emotionally invested in having Aldon Smith this year because he had a comment today about how he's trimmed down a little bit because he was playing a little overweight when he was with the Cowboys. He looks great so far in camp. He had the play against the tackling sled where he lifted it with one hand. It looks like he's ready to go and ready to be a force on the line. But I just wish we could get some clarity here. I really do. It really annoys me that we might not find out what's going on here until right before the season starts. But as of right now, he seems to believe there's at least a good chance he's going to be able to play this year. So, hey, I believe that with Aldon Smith playing and playing well with us, and maybe you roll a little Nkemdiche in there as well, we may have a top 3 pass rush in 2021 if people can stay healthy and stay productive. So that will go a long way to making this team great again. All right, I'm going to get out of here. That was a lot to go over. A lot of stuff happened yesterday that I thought was interesting and useful. I like what I'm hearing for the most part. Really worried about Eskridge. I'm not going to not be worried until I see him practicing, basically. So with that, I'm going to get out of here. Let me know what you think. Really, really, really jazzed about a Kellow Witherspoon looking good so far, because if a Kellow Witherspoon flames out, then we're going to look back at that decision to bring him in place of somebody like maybe even a Dunbar or Bashad Breeland as one of the things that may hold this team back. So really excited about that. Really excited. We're, 5 days away from the preseason starting, so let me know what you think down below. Go Hawks.